Good morning. My name is Richard Wexler, and I want to invite you to episode 17 of our podcast entitled Caring in America. So, as I do with each episode, a little recap: who am I? What am I doing with this podcast, etc. So, for the folks that have been listening, about 18 years ago, minding my own business in the software industry. My wife is running a business out of our home. We got married later. We had two small children at that time, 11 and 7. And in the summer of '05, we start getting phone calls that turned into 4 phone calls from all 4 of our parents who were in their 80s. We wound up taking care of all 4 of those parents for an unbelievable 14 years, which certainly changed our lives. It helped us create our company, Points of Life. We've been able to work with families and professionals all over the country. Started this podcast to be able to reach out to more, to still bring those experts in that people need to hear from. But as we're going to do today, to really talk about what other people have gone through or are going through with their own elder care journey, whether that's the patient or whether that is the adult children who are taking care of mom, dad, grandparents, in-laws, etc. So I want to start with an introduction to Barbara Croyle. She has an amazing educational background that includes a BA in sociology, a law degree, and a master's and MBA in gerontology. She is also a certified senior advisor, and she's been working in the senior care industry for about 20 years. And before that, she was a hospital administrator for 10 years. She's also created a consulting business as her interests are in the difficulties faced by the senior living industry, and as well as how those issues are navigated by people, by ordinary people within the system. And she works with family caregivers and older adults who want to age in their home. So we're going to bring a lot of that into play in our conversation, but we're also going to talk about a journey that she was on for her mother as a long distance caregiver until her mother passed in July of 2020. Good morning, Barbara. Are you there?
Good morning, Richard. Yes, I am.
So let our audience know where in the country you reside.
I am in Pennsylvania, over by Philadelphia.
Okay, very good. So are you a sports fan? Are you an Eagles fan, a Phillies fan, or is that not your thing?
Oh, I keep up with it. You have to know what's going on with those sports teams if you're going to live this close to Philadelphia.
There you go. I'm actually a San Francisco Giants fan. They've been in Philadelphia the last couple nights and not done well. But what is the weather like back there today?
Today it is absolutely beautiful. I know that a lot of the country is undergoing a massive heat wave or storms in the Gulf, but we have low humidity and sunshine.
Wow, that is fantastic. So as I mentioned, I mean, you have, and when we talked, I've told you this, you have an amazing educational background. You have an amazing background within the senior care, elder care industry. So you brought a lot to the table when things started happening within your own life. And as I mentioned, you were in a long distance situation, care situation with your mother. So, can you let our audience know when that started? When did she first get ill? What happened?
Well, mother started out living in North Carolina, and I was living in Pittsburgh, and she was happy, but had recently turned 65, and so she got on Medicare and she was working, but she thought she might lose her job because of her age. So my brother and I convinced her to move to Pittsburgh, where he was going to marry a Pittsburgh girl, and so he wasn't going to go anywhere. I, however, was on my way to Ohio for a job. Mother lived in Pittsburgh for the next 15 years and was very healthy. She had smoked for 50 years but gave it up. She found several part-time jobs through an agency that worked with seniors, but she never really did some of the things that we take for granted today. She never had a mammogram during her whole life. She never had a colonoscopy. She didn't like doctors of any kind, and so she treated all of her uh, illnesses, and that's in quotes, any symptoms, with nutrition. And she was very attuned to her body, but she figured supplements and food were the way that she wanted to go. Um, but when she was 80, and as I listened to you, that seemed to be this seems to be an age where things really start to go downhill. She noticeably started to decline. She had a fall, and as we know, that can be the beginning of a lot of issues for older adults. And she also had COPD and high blood pressure.
Did she break anything when she fell, or was she able to quote unquote bounce?
No, she broke her knee,
Oh, wow.
and so she went to. This was the beginning of several times that she fell. She fell, and she went to rehab in a skilled nursing facility, a nursing home, which is what happens a lot of times today. If you are an older adult and you suffer a fall, you will go to the hospital, you'll get stabilized, and then they'll send you to a skilled nursing facility for rehabilitation. Typically, you stay there for 3 weeks and then you go home.
Can you give me an idea? She passed in July of 2020. When did the fall, when did these incidents start happening?
Oh, they started happening in, let's see, about 2000, 2003.
Oh,
Then I
wow.
think she had another one, and she fell at least two or three more times before 2020.
But you're talking about 2002, 2003, 18, 17 years before she eventually passed. I mean, that's quite a period. Go ahead.
Yes, no, you're right, and she was a very healthy, resilient person, and very independent and determined, very determined to live in her own home and not go anywhere else. Once she got out of rehab, she went back to her own house, which was a duplex with stairs. Um, but she always managed to figure out a way to make it work for her. She she was very resourceful, very intelligent, and although it wasn't easy, she always managed to make something work for herself until she got to a point where she couldn't, and that was maybe when she was 85 or so, things started to
So going back,
deteriorate more.
if I can go back a little bit, so when she came out of rehab, what was the location of her residence? Where was she living?
Pittsburgh.
In Pittsburgh. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you.
She was living in Pittsburgh. We had bought a half of a duplex for her, my brother and I, and the other half of the duplex was where my brother's mother-in-law lived. And we thought this was, yeah, well, we thought this was a great idea because we thought these two women could be friends and hang out. Didn't work that way. They really did not have anything in common. And although they were friendly, they were not friends. Um, but so, that's, you try to do something that's going to work out right.
Yeah.
and
Wow.
it kind of backfired.
Were they similar age?
Yes, they were. They were similar age, but the mother in law, her name was Jo. Jo had never worked. She didn't drive, and she had no interest in anything outside of her children. Whereas my mother worked for many years, drove, and had lots of other interests, politics and music and reading, and just was very vital.
Right.
Uh,
Wow.
so they just really didn't have anything to talk about except my brother and her daughter that happened to be married.
If I can go back in time a little bit, what you mentioned about your mom really not liking doctors, not getting what you felt were the appropriate tests for her medically. Do you have any idea where that came from?
Uh, that is a really good question, and I don't because, but it was just something all her life. Oh, well, now that you mention it, I actually can remember something. Her mother died in a hospital after a minor surgery, and this was when I was about 9. So
Wow.
mother would have been 29 or 30, and so her
Wow.
mother was very young.
Wow.
And I do believe that that really colored her opinion about doctors and hospitals and and whether she was going to trust them in any way. And she never really did trust any doctors. She finally had a GP because that was the only way she could get medication, um, for her high blood pressure. But she really never trusted doctors or liked doctors for herself.
Let me ask you another question too. Along when she hit around 65 and was still doing really well, did you and or your brother have conversations with her about what she wanted as she continued to age, where she wanted to live, things like that?
No, to my deep regret, we did not ask her what she wanted. We thought we knew best, and we convinced her to leave her job in North Carolina, leave her friends, and leave her familiar surroundings and come to Pittsburgh because we thought that would be best. That is one of my major regrets, and one of the things I really learned was to not think that just because I am younger and in the senior industry field that I knew best what was for her. But she went along with it. I maybe because she just wanted to please us, or maybe because she partly believed it herself. I don't know. But she moved to
Interesting.
Pittsburgh and did not have any real friends other than family. And Pittsburgh is a very difficult town to drive in. If you've ever been there, it's really hard. Um, so she really, in my opinion, in retrospect, she gave up quite a lot to
Wow.
move to Pittsburgh.
Can I ask you another question? If some of this gets too personal, tell me that, and I won't ask these type of questions. I mean, did you feel you could have an open conversation with her about these type of things? Did you feel maybe based on her personality, I need to back off? Maybe it isn't right to ask these types of questions, or I'm the daughter, she's my mom, she may not want to answer these types of questions.
I would like to say that I didn't feel she would answer them, but the truth is, Richard, I didn't know enough to ask the right questions At the time, I assumed that because she had evidenced some misgivings about her own age, that she was concerned, and I just took it upon myself to start to tell her what I thought she should do. In retrospect, I should have asked her what she wanted and listened to what she said, whatever that was going to be.
Right. No, I get it. Go ahead. Continue your story.
Well, so she continued to decline, and my caregiving. By this time, I had moved back to Pennsylvania, but I was over here where I am now, close to Philadelphia. So she was still in Pittsburgh, which is about 400 miles away. So my caregiving was mostly informational. She would call me with questions about her health or this disease or this symptom or whatever, and I would look it up on the internet and send her information or tell her over the phone. Although she had used a computer during all of her working years, she didn't have one at her house and didn't want one. So I would print out information and send it to her. And my sister would do the same thing. I have a sister who lives in Tennessee, and so we would mostly give her information and try to help her understand uh, what might be going on with her that way. My brother helped by doing her laundry. After a couple of falls, she realized she couldn't go down the basement stairs any longer to do laundry. So she would give the laundry to my brother, and he and his wife would do it and bring it back. Also, when mother was around, 85, 88, she stopped driving. She realized that she couldn't really drive anymore, but she didn't want us to sell the car. The car sat in front of her house until she died.
Why is that? Do you have any idea?
I think it was just the the mental thing about knowing that it was out there,
There, yeah.
you
And
know,
maybe
even
hanging
though
Yeah, maybe hanging on to it. I mean, that had been her life, as it is for so many people. I give her a lot of credit for making the decision to stop driving. It's an issue that many people in this country face, and it can be extremely difficult.
you are absolutely right, and I was very grateful that we did not have to have that conversation. So she didn't drive, so she had groceries delivered from a local store. So as I said, she found ways to make it work for her, to live in her own space and get what she needed, and live her own life.
Physically, how do you think she was? I know she couldn't go down to the basement to do her laundry anymore, but physically, just able to get herself dressed, use the restroom, cook meals, things like that. How do you think she was doing at this point? And would she tell you?
Well, she was doing okay. Uh, I only saw her once, maybe twice a year. Certainly every Christmas we would go over. And as you know, it's easy to fake it when you only see somebody for 2 or 3 days a year. Um, but so she would, she was doing well enough, but she wasn't doing great. She told me that going up and down the stairs, although there were banisters, if she was having a bad day, she would just scoot herself up and down the stairs, sitting down. She did stop using the stove. She realized that that probably wasn't a safe move. So, like the car, she started using just her microwave and her toaster oven. Now you would think that with my background that I would have caught on to something a lot earlier than I did. But she would say things like, "Well, my glasses need changing. They're kind of blurry." And I would ask her periodically, did she get them changed? Was she going to go get new glasses, or was somebody going to help her get new glasses? And she continued to resist going to get new glasses. Well, eventually, I discovered that what she had was cataracts, very bad cataracts. And so we took her to the eye surgery place there in Pittsburgh to see if she was a candidate for cataract removal. And she was, but she wouldn't do it. She refused to have the cataract surgery. I had small cataracts that my optometrist told me, might eventually cause me problems, but weren't causing me problems at the time. But I went ahead and had cataract surgery so that I could tell her that it was painless, that I could see better, that things that she didn't have to worry. My sister and I planned to support her to come up to Pittsburgh and be with her during this time because cataract surgery, they do one eye and then 2 weeks later they do the other eye. She wouldn't do it. Meanwhile, her vision was continuing to get worse and worse. She wasn't able to read. She wasn't able to do the puzzles. She wasn't able to keep the house clean. Um, and her whole situation must have been very, very distressing to her. So so I continue to think about the cataract thing and wonder what I could have done differently to convince her that this would have made her life so much better. And as I pointed out to her, it would help her avoid falls. Because when you can't see anything, you have falls.
Right. Wow. And you wonder if going back to, we talked about her thought process with doctors, if this was somewhat similar, if there was a fear. I mean, you're talking and you're trying to present a case that makes sense, but obviously she has to agree to it. Did you give me an idea too? What year are we talking about, if you remember when this was happening?
This would have been, let's see, she died in 2020. This would have been 2017.
Okay. Did you guys analyze it? Did you talk between your brother and your sister about why she was resisting?
We talked about it and we tried to figure it out. I don't know to this day why she was resistant, unless she was afraid that she would lose what little sight she had left. She just she just did not want to discuss it. She did not, once she made up her mind not to have it, that's what she was going to do. Now, sadly, her last visit to the nursing home because of a fall was in January of 2020. And she told me then that when she got back home, she would have the cataract surgery.
She did. Interesting.
Yeah, but she never got back home because she was caught in the COVID situation and stayed in the nursing home during that entire period and died before she could have the surgery.
Wow. 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 I'm so sorry. Wow. I mean, your story, there's so many pieces to your story for hopefully things our audience can listen to and learn. I mean, you had this great educational background, this great background in senior care. You kind of admit probably weren't doing things that maybe the way you should have done. I had this philosophy where, I mean, for a lot of us as adult children, mom's mom, dad's dad. There's always been that role. And sometimes, even as they get ill, or they fall or both, it's kind of hard to change that role. Did that play into your psyche at all?
Very much so. Yes, it did not matter to my mother how much experience I had in senior living or how many older adults I had worked with. I was just the daughter. And she was willing to listen to what I had to say up to a point, but at the end of the day, she was going to make her own decisions. And eventually, I had to recognize that that was the way it was going to be, and I had to accept it.
What
And
I
that was
found
difficult.
Yeah, what I've found interesting over the years, and I've talked about this in talks that I've given, I mean, our parents, maybe especially mom, I don't, maybe mom's 95 and you're 70. So, I mean, you're older yourself and mom's still alive. And then you start making recommendations to mom, and mom doesn't want to listen, and the thoughts in the back of her head is exactly what you just said. Hey, I'm the mom. You're my daughter. I diapered you. And that relationship doesn't seem to change sometimes throughout our life. But in the story that you're talking about with your mom, that relationship makes things difficult.
It does. Well, it really does, Richard. It was very difficult. And I think it was difficult for both of us. It was difficult for me to accept her, what I viewed at the time as stubbornness, but which I have since decided is just her desire to remain independent. And it was difficult for her to keep hearing me kind of nag at her. And I tried not to, but I imagine that that's how she viewed it, as nagging and as trying to interfere in her life. You know, as we get older, uh, uh, our lives, our vision, our world shrinks. And it happens just naturally. It shrinks because we are no longer working, because we lose the ability to do certain things, whether it's drive, whether it's walk long distances, garden, we lose mobility, we lose our hearing, we lose our vision, and we become isolated. And so I think that all of us will have a tendency to hold on to as much of our independence as we possibly can, regardless, yes, regardless of how our situation is. And now that I recognize that, I recognize it in myself, and can certainly see it in all of the older adults that I work with and talk to. And I have come to respect that need for independence and respect that need to continue to be who they are, whatever that means for them.
That's a great lesson. Let me ask you something else. And if would you have been open? Sometimes when I counsel families, I'll tell them exactly what we are just talking about. You're the daughter, she's mom. You may have the brightest things in the world to suggest to her, but she's mom and she just doesn't want to listen. Would you have been open looking back to possibly bringing a third party in? Because what I've found over the years, sometimes older folks, when another professional comes into the situation that isn't their daughter, isn't their son, they may actually sit up and pay more attention. Would you have been open to that? In what you were going through?
Absolutely. I mean, isn't the saying something like a prophet is not respected in his own country? Um, and if I had known of someone, I would have I would have brought them in. I did not know who to call
Sure.
or where to find these people since I was so far away. And I relied on friends that I had made when I was living in Pittsburgh, but they didn't know either. So I really struggled finding reliable resources for her from such a long distance.
And folks that are listening, I totally understand what Barbara's saying, and that's why we're trying to build this resource guide, but also you can reach out to a company like mine. You can reach out to other companies that are out there within your community. Sometimes, if you just reach out to an assisted living in your community or an in home care company in your community, let them know the situation you're in. They may know folks like I'm talking about, an independent third party that may be able to come in and be part of that conversation between you, some siblings, and mom and dad. Those people are out there. And I understand, I mean, why you don't know them and why Barbara didn't know them, but I found they can be very helpful. So as we kind of wrap up, Barbara, I mean, what did you learn from all this? I mean, is there a lesson? Are there multiple lessons? What are your thoughts?
I think that yes, I learned quite a few things. I think it's important to understand what is really what is really needed, and that requires what we've talked about during this conversation: asking the right questions of the person that you're caring for. You also need to be able to respond quickly, and that means knowing what resources are available to help. Um, Finding people that are willing to work with you or your loved one who aren't going to charge an arm and a leg. A lot of caregivers, family caregivers particularly, don't have um, a lot of money to spend. My mother was very private about money, but she was not happy whenever I spent my own money. She wanted to spend her own money. Um, and then I think just being there enough to make a difference. I like your idea of bringing in someone else to talk to her. She would not have wanted home health or any kind of regular visit. She, again, her privacy and her independence felt threatened, but she might have been willing to talk with someone just as a companion for an afternoon or something like that. I remember one time I asked her why she wasn't honest with me about her situation, why she wasn't telling me the truth about how she was having to live. And she said, "Barbara, if you knew how I was having to live my life, you would put me in a nursing home." And I was crushed because I would never do that. But it brought home to me her real desire to remain where she was and to take care of herself as long as she possibly could. And it did change my perspective of her independence and her need for that.
Well, Barbara, I thank you. I thank you for coming on today. I thank you for sharing such a personal story. Obviously, very sad for your loss. Um, Hopefully we've given our audience something to think about, some issues to think about if they're going through something similar, or if something similar may come up in the future. So very much appreciate you coming on. As I wrap this up, folks, I talk about this. Please reach out to me. I'm about to give you an email. If you want to share a story, whether it's a personal story like Barbara, or whether you're a professional and you want to share a story or multiple stories about a patient or client, please reach out. Do you have a pen? I'm about to give you my contact information. The email is eldered2023 at gmail.com. ELDERED 2023 at gmail.com. And once again, Barbara, I thank you very much. I thank you for sharing this. And as we wrap up, please have yourself a wonderful day and the beautiful weather you have back there.
Thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
You're very welcome. So, folks, as I always do, until we talk again, have yourself an awesome day. Good morning. My name is Richard Wexler, and this is Caring in America. So, what's coming next? What episodes do we have lined up? First, a conversation with Sean Barnes. Sean is actually in the placement industry. He's been doing it for a long time, about 13 years, and is going to share some stories about a tornado, about caring for his mom, about caring for clients, about cognitive decline with his mom, and then getting scammed on top of that. So, what did that mean from an emotional standpoint, from a financial standpoint, to be scammed? Something that's happening to a lot of older folks in our country. That conversation will be downloaded soon. We are also going to have a conversation with Wendy Frank. Wendy lives in Eagle, Idaho. She owns a landscaping company with her husband. But roll the clock back to about 2005. Wendy was 23 years old. Like a lot of people at that age, trying to figure out where she's going with her life. It was around Christmas time that year. Her dad took off without a helmet on a quad and had an accident. It resulted in brain damage. It obviously changed his life. It changed Wendy's life. It changed her mom's life, as they now were in a care situation for her dad, for the husband, for 7 years until he eventually passed. Wendy's conversation is pretty riveting. She'll talk about the things she went through. She'll talk about all the things she and her mom learned from this experience. So we encourage you folks to listen to both those episodes. They should be downloaded soon. And as we always do, until we talk again, have yourself an awesome day. Thank you.